You know, we're going to assume you're here because you have an engine with uneven cranking speeds and you just don't want to pull the spark plugs and do a engine compression test. Now we're going to use two methods to shortcut that. That doesn't mean you may never have to do a compression test or a cylinder leak down test, but we have two quick tests right here. First and foremost, make sure that the starting system, the battery, and the starter are all good, because that would be the first thing I would think of if I had an engine with uneven cranking. Now I want to thank the Cenex technology people for sending us this sensor, the first look sensor. If you want to contact them, their number is on the screen. It saves us a lot of time when we connect this to a lab scope and do cranking compression tests. First thing you want to do is put that first look sensor into the tailpipe, and then we're going to disable the ignition system. Now I know you're used to us telling you you can disable the ignition or the fuel, which is ever easy. We're going to use the fuel injector, so we don't want to disable the fuel system because we want to trigger on injector number 1. You can see we're going to hook a lab scope channel up to number 1. Triggering on injector number 1 is going to synchronize the pressure waveform so we can identify the firing order inside the waveform. And you can see we looked up for our vehicle here the correct firing order, 1342. Now this is the waveform that's going to appear on the lab scope, and you're going to see that we're reminding you that this is during the engine is cranking with the ignition disabled. And in the green waveform, you can see at the bottom of the screen, that is an injector, and it's injector number 1. And then you can see the pulses are from the cylinders, and we label them with the firing order for you. Now, when you're diagnosing this waveform, it can be a bit confusing when you first start out. The more complicated the exhaust system, the more confusing the waveform is going to look, because the configurations of exhaust are going to change the way the waveform actually appears. And we're using a neon here with a straightforward exhaust system, so we have a nice waveform. We want you to pay close attention to the area between the arrows as we show you this live running first look test. We're cranking the engine, and you can see that we're actually doing the test now. Now that's what a good one looks like. We were paying close attention to the area between the two arrows. You can see it rises slightly, and then it comes down, and then it goes back up. Now here's a bad running engine, or an engine with a bad cylinder on it, I should say. As you can see, it looks different. Now, as we look in the same area we told you to pay attention to, you can see that the pattern doesn't look like the other patterns. It starts its little rise, but it doesn't have the amplitude that the others did. When you see a bad cylinder, you're going to have to go do a cranking compression test to determine what's wrong with the engine. Now, the waveform here also shows turbulence in that bad cylinder. We're pointing to it there. It's a little bit of an uglier pattern than the rest of them, and the big thing is you notice the amplitude right away. Now let's look at this next cylinder, because right away when we were showing you that live test, I bet most of you looked here because the amplitude went way high. Now this is the cylinder after the bad cylinder. This is a good cylinder, but the pattern after the bad cylinder has reversed itself. Whereas the other ones went up a little bit and then down and then went up to normal amplitude, this shoots up higher than normal, then goes down and then goes to a normal amplitude. And it also, the trailing edge of the pattern after the bad cylinder is a little bit shorter. And that's the way the pattern after the bad cylinder looks. It looks a little bit confused, because the pulses in the exhaust is what's being measured, So the bad cylinder also has an effect on the next cylinder in line. The pattern returns to normal on the last cylinder here. Differences in engines may have different waveforms. And believe me, the more you hook the first look up into different engines, you're going to see, wow, most of them do look different. But the principle remains the same. Look for the differences in the pattern. Now, if you're going to use an engine analyzer, you're going to do a relative compression or power contribution test, depending on what your analyzer calls it. If all cylinders are within 10% of each other, go to valve timing test. If one cylinder is low, go to engine running compression test for that cylinder. If several cylinders are low or they're uneven, go to cranking compression test. And that's how you want to interpret your results of your analyzer. You will now be returned to the test selection menu. Make a selection based on your test results.